remember the night I went looking for the spirit of Christmas Eve and almost thought I'd lost it. You might think that's strange coming from me. After all, I am supposed to be something like the spirit of the night myself, aren't I? The red coat, the sleigh, the gifts, the laughter, but even I am not the whole story. I ride through the sky and down chimneys, yes, but what I really do is move through hearts. And some years, in some places, that heart is harder to find. One such year, I came in over a big city, just as the last light of late afternoon slipped away, the sky turning from bruised purple to ink. You know the kind of city I mean. Tall buildings lined up like books on a shelf, streetlights blinking on one by one, windows stacked in columns of yellow and white. Cars filled the roads, their lights streaming in long ribbons. Shop signs glowed in red and blue and green. On any other night, the city would have felt loud and alive. On Christmas Eve, it used to feel different. I remember when the same city, years ago, seemed to hush a little as night fell. The traffic thinned. People hurried home with parcels under their arms, smiling at strangers as they passed. Music drifted from open windows, and someone somewhere was always singing a carol just off key. There was bustle, yes, but it was warm bustle. This year, as I brought my sleigh lower, I heard only urgency. Cars honked in impatience. People jostled past one another on the sidewalks, their faces lit by the pale blue glow of their phones. Some rushed from shop to shop, bags cutting into their hands, brows furrowed. Others argued quietly, snapping and sighing, distracted by lists and delays and the feeling that time was running out. I did not see many people looking up at the sky. I landed my sleigh on the flat roof of a tall office building, the sort of place with dark, blank windows and a big metal box humming away at the far end. The reindeer stamped their hooves softly, their breath hanging in the cold air. I patted their necks, then walked to the edge of the roof and peered down. Below me, a wide avenue stretched out, lined with decorated windows. There were lights in the trees, glittering and dancing. There were plastic reindeer on balconies, inflatable snowmen bobbing in the wind, signs advertising last-minute sales in cheerful fonts. It all looked festive enough on the surface. But when I listened closely, beneath the carols spilling from loudspeakers and the jingle of shop doors, I heard something hollow. It was as if the spirit of Christmas Eve were hiding, uncertain of where it was welcome. I stood there for a moment, boots planted in the thin drift of snow that had somehow found its way up to that rooftop, and wondered, half aloud, where are you then? Where have you gone tonight? Now, the spirit of Christmas Eve is not a person I can tap on the shoulder. It is not a ghost or a glittering figure. It is something that moves between people, in a hand held out, in a shared laugh, in a pause long enough to notice someone else's eyes. When it is strong, it's as easy to find as the scent of cinnamon near a bakery. When it weakens, you must follow the faintest hints. So I closed my eyes and listened, the way you listen for distant bells across snow. At first, I heard what I had heard before, worry, rushing, a restless rustling of minds jumping ahead to the next task. But underneath all that, if I listened closely, there were other sounds. A child's excited gasp, a lullaby being hummed in a small apartment, the scrape of a chair as someone stood to stir a pot with care, tiny lights buried under the noise. All right, I said softly to myself, you are still here, just hiding. I decided that before I filled my sack from this rooftop and began my usual rounds, I wanted to see where the spirit was truly living in that city. Not in the decorations, not in the store displays, but in the people. I stepped forward, and instead of dropping into a chimney, I let myself slip through the air and down toward the street, invisible to every rushing passerby. The cold wind moved through my beard. The snow felt sharp and clean on my face. The first place I found it was in a little side street, away from the wide avenue. There, beside a small grocery store with fogged windows, stood a man in a thin jacket holding a cardboard sign. He was not begging loudly. He simply stood, his shoulders hunched, his fingers red with cold, his eyes on the pavement. Most people hurried past, their own anxieties wrapped tightly around them like coats. They saw him and did not see him. Their thoughts were on the last gift, the timing of the roast, the train they had to catch. But then a woman came out of the grocery store with 2 bags in her arms. She was not wealthy, this one. Her coat was patched at the elbows, and her shoes had scuffed toes. She paused when she saw the man, and something in her face softened. She set her bags down on the slushy ground, reached into one, and took out a loaf of bread and a small packet of cheese. "It's not much," she said, pressing them into his hands, "but it's something, and there's a shelter 2 streets over. They keep the lights on late tonight." The man blinked, his eyes suddenly bright with more than cold. "Thank you," he said, voice thick. "No one stopped all evening." She shrugged, embarrassed. "Happy Christmas," she murmured, lifting her bags again. The spirit of Christmas Eve flared between them then, invisible to everyone else, but bright as a flare to me. It shimmered in the space where their eyes met, in the warmth that moved through both of their chests. It clung to the bread and the cheese and the simple words. "There you are," I thought. "That's one place." I moved on. Near the big train station, I watched crowds surge in and out of the sliding doors, suitcases rolling, announcements echoing. A boy of about 7 clutched his father's hand, his other hand holding a small toy car. The father frowned at the timetable with a crease between his brows, trying to calculate connections, delays, the quickest way to get where they were going. "Papa," the boy said, tugging at his hand, "do you think you'll come tonight, even if we're on the train?" "Who?" the father asked, distracted. "Santa," the boy whispered, a little hesitant now, as if perhaps he were too old to ask. His father looked down, and for a moment, the timetable, the frustration, the worry about weather and schedules all fell away. He saw his son's hopeful face, the wide-open trust there. "I think," he said slowly, "that he can find you anywhere, as long as you're hoping. He's very good at finding." The boy smiled, a small, relieved kind of smile. "Even if we don't have a tree there?" he asked. "Even then," his father said. "Maybe we'll make our own tree out of coats and hats and imagination." The spirit of Christmas Eve whispered between them, from the father's tired heart to the child's. It sat in that silly promise of a coat and hat tree on a train. It turned a delay into a story they would remember. I followed it from there to a hospital window where a nurse with aching feet paused at the door to a dim room. Inside, a little girl with a bandage around her arm lay asleep, her head turned slightly toward the corridor. The nurse leaned against the doorframe for a moment, then stepped inside and set a tiny paper star on the bedside table, right where the girl would see it when she woke. "From the night," she whispered, "so you'll know it was thinking of you." The spirit brushed her cheek like a kiss as she left, and I saw it settle gently over the sleeping child like an extra blanket. Again and again, in that city that felt so frantic from above, I found it, in the neighbor who knocked on another neighbor's door, just to say, "If you need anything tonight, I'm home." In a teenager who gave up his bus seat and then walked 2 extra stops in the falling snow. In a family who set 1 extra place at the table and filled it with memories of someone gone, speaking their name with both tears and laughter. But I also saw many places where the spirit seemed absent, where people brushed past one another so quickly that no light had a chance to catch. I returned at last to my rooftop, my beard damp with snowflakes, my coat dusted white. The reindeer snorted softly as I approached, their harness bells chiming just a little. "Well?" I asked the night. "Is it enough?" Of course, there was no answer but the wind. Still, I knew. It's never as much as I wish it would be, but it's more than it seems from a distance. The spirit of Christmas Eve is stubborn. Even when buried under worry and noise and tiredness, it finds the smallest cracks and shines through. It's not my job to create it. It's my joy to carry it along. So I took hold of the reins and lifted my sack, heavier now not only with toys and books and sweets, but with the warmth I had gathered in my heart from those small hidden acts. Every time a person looks up from their own troubles long enough to see someone else, it gives me strength. You may not know that, but it does. A simple kindness makes my sleigh lighter. A shared laugh makes my route shorter. A moment of forgiveness clears the skies. As I began my work in that city, slipping down chimneys, easing through locked windows, stepping into rooms where breathing was slow and steady, and rooms where breathing was light with excitement, I left more than wrapped parcels. I left reminders. A note tucked into a stocking that said, in neat swirling script, "You are not forgotten." A small lantern-shaped ornament hanging on a tree in a home where someone felt very alone. A book left just where a worried parent would find it, its first page carrying a story about someone who learned, slowly, that they were enough. And in one apartment, on the 9th floor of a building that looked like all the others from outside, I paused a little longer. A woman sat at a table, head bowed over bills and lists. Her cup of tea had gone cold. The lights on her small potted tree blinked unevenly. In the next room, her children slept, their stockings hanging empty for the moment. She rubbed her forehead and sighed. "I'm not doing this right," she whispered to herself. "It doesn't feel like it's supposed to. I'm too tired." I set down the small gifts I had for the children, a truck, a book of stories, a set of crayons. Then I stepped closer to her, unseen, and simply stood there, as present as I could be. "Look," I thought, as if my thoughts could touch hers. "There's more happening here than you realize. The spirit is not in how many presents you wrap, or whether you remembered the special biscuits. It's in the way you kissed their foreheads, even when you were exhausted. It's in the way you checked on your neighbor last week. It's in the way you keep going." She shivered and reached for her mug, though I doubt she understood why. She took a breath, let it out slowly, and then, to my quiet delight, she stood and walked into the room where her children slept. She tucked the blanket more snugly around one, picked up a drop toy from the floor, and just for a moment she smiled. Not a big triumphant smile, but a small, real one. "Happy Christmas," she whispered. The spirit of Christmas Eve, which had been hovering in the doorway, rushed to meet those words. It filled the small bedroom with a softness that had nothing to do with blankets. It brushed her shoulders. It rested on the window pane, on the tree, on the tiny stockings. By the time I climbed back into my sleigh to leave that city behind and fly on to the next, the worry I'd felt at first had eased. Yes, there was rushing and noise and distraction. Yes, many people would tumble into bed that night without ever once pausing long enough to feel the spirit standing quietly beside them. But enough had felt it. Enough had let it move their hands and their hearts. And that was all it needed for another year. If this Christmas Eve you ever wonder whether the spirit has gone missing, if the lists feel longer than the hours, if the world feels loud and sharp, if your own heart feels too tired to be festive, remember this. It is never as gone as you think. It is not hiding in the perfect meal or the perfect gift or the perfect song. It is waiting in the small, simple act you have not yet taken. A call you could make, a door you could knock on, a place at your table you could mentally set for someone you miss. A moment when you simply sit, breathe, and whisper thank you for something, however small. When you do, you will feel it, that subtle shift in the air. You will not see a figure in a cloak or hear a trumpet. You will simply know, in a quiet corner of your chest, that something gentle has leaned nearer. That is the spirit of Christmas Eve. And I will be out there, as I always am, riding the high winds and the low currents, listening for it, gathering it, and carrying it from one rooftop to the next. When I notice it shining from your window, or glowing from your doorway, or flickering bravely in your tired but willing heart, I will tip my head and say, to the night and to myself, there it is. We are all right for another year. Merry Christmas, my friend. May that spirit find you, and may you find it. Wherever you are tonight,